Hello, ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. On behalf of the flight crew, let me welcome you aboard Oceanic Flight 815, non-stop service to some shithole. Folks, I've hit my cruising altitude of way too high due to some legal edibles from Colorado, which means you're free to move about the cabin as long as you're wearing a helmet. Our in-flight entertainment during this 57-hour non-stop 4 trips around the Earth flight is the New Way podcast from Last Pint Productions. Now, this podcast contains adult content, so if you've got kids, you're screwed, because we are legally obligated to play nothing at all but 56 episodes of the New Way in their entirety. So, sit back and relax and try not to think about Matt getting off to Tom Hanks. Over, under.
Welcome to Japan, Mr. Bond. It is a great pleasure to meet you at last. And how do you like our country so far?
I don't want to my old mate Jim to spit down Whitechapel way.
Daddy's speaking English.
All I know is I have to catch an Austrian Airlines flight tomorrow morning at 9:30, and it'd be a lot more fun if you came with me.
Could you do it slower?
最高な気持ちで
More intensity.
Everybody wants to be naked and famous. Everybody wants to be just like me and naked.
Will you help teach me about this? What is it? A new way?
Willkommen! Konnichiwa! How do you do? Welcome to a very international...
Bonjour.
Bonjour. Yeah, that's what I remember. Aloha and hola to those of us, those of you out there that speak other languages.
Arrivederci.
Arrivederci. And of course...
Mi
scusi. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of The New Way, which I think we're going to get like 2 this month that are going to air.
Yeah,
so.
slightly pared down this time. Slightly pared down.
It is another time when it is...
yes.
That's right. On International Steak and Blowjob Day, Ben and I have decided to make it official with steaks and blowjobs for 1 hour. So we keep up the normal length of the New Way podcast.
Does it have to last for the whole hour? Because
I mean, I won't, nor will the steak. So no, probably over about 10 minutes for both, I guess.
It's gonna be a short podcast.
It's gonna be short everything.
Yeah. Unfortunately, Nick kind of called a last minute audible here on us. We had a topic that we were planning on talking about for a while, and but Nick is in some pain.
He's in the state of pain, apparently right now. So we're not sure what we will let you know. We will keep you updated on Nick's condition as he updates
don't
us.
worry, it's not like abdominal or heart pain. It's foot pain.
It's foot related. So I have no interest in it, and I kind of don't want to help because that is my kryptonite. But I mean, yeah. So we're wishing Nick a speedy recovery, and we're gonna soldier on together.
Guess what? He's missing out today though because I actually brought some. Treats?
Any more
yeah.
treats?
That's what. So I've there's Beth informed me that you were bringing treats, and you told me not to look in the
bag.
So
yeah, this is just for you because we were discussing them.
Oh, it's a Kinder Egg. So we were discussing this on Oscar evening, which we're going to talk about as well on tonight's podcast. But we're talking about Kinder Eggs, and if you've ever been to France, Kinder Eggs are like a not so well-kept secret. They're just like this thing that you have to get when you're in France, and you can't get them in the U.S. They're like outlawed in the U.S. And then apparently they were contraband.
Yeah,
It was like Cuban cigars. Like you could only get them in France, and then they started bringing them here. And I'd asked Beth about it, and she said they're not quite as good. But for those of you who don't know, a Kinder Egg is chocolate wrapped around like an Easter plastic egg type thing with the Kinder one's a surprisingly good toy. Often of Smurf variety, because Smurfs, if you don't know, come from France. Yes. So
kind of like Legos come from Belgium.
There you go. From IKEA. Okay, I'm gonna try to. This thing's hard to fucking open.
I should have brought a knife in.
I need a crowbar to. Okay, so Oh, yeah, so this is different already. Mine's got some sort of a spoon device on it, or light fan. I'm not sure. So this one is
You want me to do the play-by-play of you opening your Kinder Egg?
There are two halves. One half is shiny and one is not.
He's peeling back the not shiny label. Very.
Oh my god. It is I think, is it Patrick from SpongeBob SquarePants that I'm about to put together?
Well,
no, it's a penis. It's hold on.
Happy National Blowjob and Steak Day.
It's got stickers and it's it's like a little penis wearing red pants. I'm not kidding. I'll put them together here, but it is legit a dick wearing red pants. I mean, there is legitimately a little penis standing there in his little red pants.
It's not too far off.
And now now the other side of it, where it should be chocolate. Oh no, this is not at all what I was expecting. This is much worse than what I was expecting. Have you opened one of these yet?
No, I have not. Should I?
I have.
Oh no! Again.
So I can't make this up. I am looking at two little brown balls in white goo. It literally looks like little hairy testicles in like goo. So I gotta send pictures of this.
Sweet cream topped with cocoa wafer bites.
There you go. That's what this little spoon thing is for. You dig out the little brown balls.
Okay, well, but you see, you have to we have to try this simultaneously. I think at one point.
You and me simultaneous. I know this is not making for great radio, but I'm taking a picture right now to send to Beth, and we will post this on here. But this legit looks like furry testicles.
It does. It's furry testicles.
It's furry little brown balls.
So my toy does not look as much like a penis.
No, well, that's a shame.
Unfortunately, unless it's very sickly.
To quote Bad Santa, they can't all be winners.
Mine is instead a rabbit.
Oh, yours is a blue
rabbit that does not look like it belongs on this earth.
Mine, by the way, has a gaping hole in the back of its head.
As it should.
Like, it literally looks like something blew right through it.
Oh, wait. So, but I still get to stick this little stand up this bunny's ass.
Oh, well, there you go. Oh, and I can see your bunny on my sheet. You must have, B.
There, I'm putting it. Is our mascot for the episode. In the meantime, I feel like we should try this.
Oh man, I gotta be honest. I'm a little terrified of this.
Sweet cream balls. Oh my god! I just flung it out at myself. No, my ball attacked me.
That is disgusting. You just flung a little brown white covered goo. Oh yeah, they're hard to like. They're kind of crammed in here. That's really disgusting chewing. Gotta be honest. It's really terrible.
I'm doing a little over the top. Just. So it kind of tastes like Ferrero Rocher and white chocolate cum.
Yeah, it's a salty chocolate ball. That is for sure.
Yeah,
this is
different.
The brown goo I find to be in opposition to the white goo. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna put a little cold though.
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay not eating the rest of that.
Yeah, I'm. That ball was that was a filling ball. Well, thank you, Beth. You're probably one of the only people listening to this.
Well, actually, so just what we'll do is I have one here for Nick. So I think we should surprise him with his balls when you get back.
Nick,
guys,
we have balls waiting for you here in the studio.
Once Matt gets back from China,
as the locals like to call it. Yes, I am leaving tomorrow for New York for a day to see the wonderful Josh Burgess for an evening. And then on Friday morning, I am flying to Guangzhou, China, for work, and then also going to Beijing. So I will be gone for 13 days, 12 days, something like that, back in a week and a half or so. And it's going to be crazy. I hope to come back with quite a few stories, sordid tales of ribaldry and whatnot from the wonderful country of China. The language I do not speak, with going with a crazy South African who tends to get on the wrong side of people occasionally, and we shall see how it all goes down. But I'll be visiting factories and an Irish pub for St. Paddy's Day. In fact, I found there are multiple Irish pubs.
You're going to be visiting one more Irish pub than I will on St. Patrick's Day, apparently.
Correct. Well, my choice is Hooley's or the Paddy Field. Hooley's had quite the lineup of musicians that I was kind of curious about seeing, but it looks like it's in some sort of strange mall. Like indoor mall.
Yes.
I'm a little frightened by that.
So
Paddy Field will probably
Paddy
be.
Field is probably the go-to there.
It's going to be a little expensive. I also did find a place called, I think it's called Johnny Walker's. Is the name of it.
Uh-huh.
And according to all the reviews, it is a little taste of Scotland in China. And you can get you take a tour of this like Johnny Walker distillery.
Interesting.
Yes, it's very bizarre.
Have you ever seen the Robert Carlyle Keep Walking Johnny Walker ad?
No, I don't think
okay.
so.
Well, we'll have to watch that. Not super pertinent to this episode, but almost kind of related.
Yeah.
So anyways, we had this kind of something we've actually been talking about for a couple of months now as far as a podcast topic is concerned. But since Nick is not here, we pulled kind of a random one out. And since Matt was leaving, and because I've had some significant travel, fortunately, some significant travel experience in my life, I wanted to kind of think about
Oh, good for you.
Yes, thank you. Not so much. I know we've talked about road trip movies and kind of traveling, and
Well,
movies.
hold on. You're skipping right past
Okay.
the Oscars.
Oh yeah, let's talk
Which
about the Oscars first.
we talked pre-Oscars. We have not talked to you since the Oscars, but I think the general consensus was that this was the most low-key, by the book, straightforward Oscars that
Boring.
maybe has ever existed. And I wouldn't necessarily say it was boring. I mean, I wasn't not entertained. It
No,
just
I
wasn't,
enjoyed it actually. I thought it was fine.
It wasn't crazy or wild because they couldn't. They literally is the one year where they were not
You can't-
allowed to do really anything.
Yeah, and nobody said anything completely outlandish, and everyone kind of played their role, and people who were expected to win won. And
Yeah,
that's pretty much it. I mean, we talked about going into it how, the one that was kind of up in the air we felt was Best Picture, but I had a pretty strong feeling going into that evening that The Shape of Water was going to win. I was happy it won.
Grinding Nemo.
Grinding Nemo.
Still the funniest fake title ever.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't disagree. I can't disagree with any of the awards necessarily. And it's always interesting when you get to a year like this where you've got all of these just huge character actors really in almost everything that was up. And it's like any one of those people could have won and I would have said body of work, yes. Like, I don't think that anybody's performance was their best performance that won, but it was all people that deserved an Oscar.
Right, exactly. Like
in general.
In my opinion, Gary Oldman deserved an Oscar for Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy 8 years ago, know, and or
any number of things,
or any number of things,
And Rockwell could have gotten it for Confessions of a Dangerous Mind, or Snow Angels, or
Yeah.
and Richard Jenkins for everything he's ever done since the history of time. So yeah, I think it was really interesting to just see it kind of like watch a nice year was just very, very sort of, I guess, safe performances necessary, and it was good to see Jordan Peele win, which was pretty awesome to see kind of that history being made, especially for somebody like that. That's like, I love his story of his why he stopped acting. I don't know if you saw it. They played it a lot. Basically, they offered him the poop emoji role in the Emoji Movie, and he's like, "That's it. That's it. I can't
done
anymore.
Can't do the poop." And I was happy to see, even though I'm very split on his filmography. I typically either like his movies a lot, or I either find them almost masterful, or I find them very pandering, which is Guillermo del Toro. But I was happy to see him win because I would say the upper half of his body of work with Devil's Backbone, Pan's Labyrinth, The Shape of Water, and a few other films that you could potentially throw in that mix as well. He's nothing if not completely original.
Yeah,
And
there's nothing borrowed in anything he does, for better or for worse. And, you know, like, I know you don't like either. I love the first Hellboy. I don't like the second Hellboy.
the funny thing is I think that the first Hellboy is an enjoyable, just kind of by the numbers comic film where I love the performances. The second Hellboy I admire just for the production design.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's a beautiful movie, but the movie itself kind of sucks. You know,
It's even it's try. But yeah, I'm kind of the same with him. But Pan's Labyrinth then comes out. Like I remember Pan's Labyrinth followed Hellboy 2 or was
no. He did Hellboy in 2004.
No, the second Hellboy.
Second Hellboy was 2000. No, that was after Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Okay, yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting to watch how these filmmakers go from movie to movie, which, you know, one we'll probably be talking about in a few weeks.
I mean, it's just incredible that you talk about a director, and it's actually an interesting thing to think about. The director who just won Best Picture and Best Director was the director of fucking Pacific Rim. Pacific Rim, which might be either the worst... most awesome movie of all time or the best worst movie of all time. I'm not sure which one. I flip-flop.
You know, and I'll say that is the only one of his movies I feel feels not of his own. And I feel that it feels like every other dumb...
Transformers.
Yeah, like it doesn't. It's the only one of his movies I'm just actively dislike, instead of just being like, okay, there are things I dislike about this movie. But
yeah.
And I remember after Hellboy... There was a lot of talk about him directing the fifth Harry Potter movie because he turned down Azkaban and Cuarón took it.
Right.
And then
one of the three amigos.
Exactly. And then he was like, and then Cuarón was like, "Come on, man, you got to do this. Do one of these.
Right.
Do one of these."
For those of you who don't know, the three amigos are Alfonso Cuarón, Guillermo del Toro, and
I don't know the third.
He did Amos Paris, and he did 21 Grams and.
Pedro Almodovar?
Babel, yes. No, not Pedro Almodovar. He did 21 Grams in Babel. Jesus Christ.
I don't know the name.
It's killing me.
Glad we're talking about foreign directors in our travel
Anyways.
movie. We didn't get to, but no, it is. I really wanted him after Hellboy to direct the fifth Harry Potter, mainly because I thought he'd do a really good job with the Ministry of Magic. I kind of wanted to see what his version of that would have been, and I think he would have focused more on that part of it. But it's interesting to think about that. And also, I mean, it's similar with him as a director, because right now I'm now excited about Ready Player One, which finally screened at SXSW, which is Ernie Klein's novel directed by Steven Spielberg, which I was. I saw the trailers and it seemed very noisy and loud, and I wasn't getting the Spielberg magic. I was getting just kind of like the same thing I got from the BFG, or maybe like even kind of, we talked about Transformers there.
It's Alejandro Inarritu.
There we go. Inarritu.
Anyways, yeah.
But apparently Ready Player One is the real deal.
It's a lot of fun, yeah.
And my favorite, somebody tweeted, it was my favorite thing. They were like, "Yeah, I'm really glad this young upstart filmmaker Steven Spielberg got a chance to prove himself out there to all of you that didn't believe his track record of sci-fi movies that include Minority Report, AI, War of the Worlds, E.T." Like, listen all this time. Like, glad he got a chance. I'm glad he proved himself to you finally. It is interesting to think that you can turn, just based on previews, you can kind of turn on a filmmaker with a preconceived notion, which I think I 100% did. And now I'm hearing just like raves of just it's fun and it's got a ton of heart.
The thing that I read that I thought was interesting was a lot of people say it improves on the book in certain areas. And
I heard that too.
And I'm interested in what that means, because it's a far from perfect book, but it's already so cinematic in its construction that I'm interested in seeing what it is that they change, because apparently that's what people say. It's consistently kind of across the board. People say there are changes that make it a better movie.
I'm guessing. I mean, I don't know. I don't know exactly where the movie goes with it. I have a feeling, knowing somebody like Spielberg, the plot details of the book toward the end are sort of there's a cat and mouse thing, there's a corporation, there are these kind of struggles for things, and I can see that going any number of ways built in that universe to play that out a little bit differently or do something a little bit stranger with it.
I'm assuming one thing that they're going to do is they're going to constrict the timeline because in the actual book it takes like 18 months from you to get from almost no longer than that, almost 2 years from the beginning to the very end, because he like goes into hiding and is like working off of this like weird Oasis machine and stuff like that. And
there's a lot of very Blade Runner-esque kind of like sideline things, and I think you can excise pretty easily. But I'm super excited for that.
I wouldn't be surprised if they condense this like 2-year thing into more of like a 3 weeks type of thing, where he's finding one key and going to find the next key and going to find the next thing. It's just kind of like going to be nonstop, that type of thing, where it's not going to kind of rest on its laurels at all.
I'm excited. Yeah, I'll watch that when I'll be getting back from China like 2 days before that, so we will have to make a date.
I'm there.
But yeah, so to dive into our topic, Bennett talked about saying kind of travel movies, and we've done road trips almost kind of a couple of times in different ways on the podcast before as far as that. But I was kind of so you'd kind of laid out some guidelines, and I had some.
It wasn't even guidelines, because you were just like, I don't want to kind of retread or rehash something we've already talked about. And my whole thing is that I feel like there's a huge differentiation between something that's a specific subset, because sometimes we get very specific when it comes to like a road trip movie is a very specific subset. You could say it involves travel, or you could say it involves, multiple locations or that type of thing. But what I was more interested of is our perception of the world based off of what we've seen in movies, and the vice versa of that, of what we have, how we have judged movies based off of our own experiences with travel or with people from other cultures or that type of thing. Because it really is, I've had a very interesting experience, like I said, because I've had a chance to travel a lot, and because I've seen a lot of these places. There's two flip sides of the coin. There's something that's just, you'll see something that's so romanticized in a Bond movie, and you go there and you're just like, this is not what this country is like. Or you'll have the complete flip opposite, where you'll see something that somebody is either making fun of in the movie, and you go and you're just like, this is a lovely place and lovely people and wonderful, like how,
Yes.
And there, we can talk about traversing time periods and all sorts of stuff like that, but I do like movies that involve, a location, like, where
the location is central to the...
Or the multitude of locations, and that's not a road trip necessarily. I mean, they like I said,
it's a globe-trotting.
Like Bond movies are always a really good example, because Bond movies typically always exist in 5 or 6 different countries.
Yeah,
and so you're getting this kind of taste of these different. You're supposed to be getting this taste of these different cultures, but
Bond is the worst.
It's the worst.
It's the worst to get an education on other countries.
And that's what I found was really interesting, is because I love Bond movies, but you can never take what you see in a Bond movie for being like the quintessential, like, oh, that's what it's like in that country, because it's absolutely not. And then there are some I feel that are very spot on, and then there are some that play on to the really seedy side of things, or to a very, where they're misrepresented. And then there are lots of countries I visited
or played for laughs, or
exactly, and that's actually I have a really good one for that too. So that's sort of what I wanted to play off. And so my initial question was, I was speaking with Matt about this just before, but talk about the places internationally that you've traveled, because I know that there's not a ton, but what were just your initial perceptions of it?
All my movies are time travel movies, so I chose to travel through time instead of from location to location.
Okay.
So let's talk about it. No, I'm just, no, I mean, so the first time I went out of the country, other than, that's not out of the country, but I went to Hawaii when I was little, which seemed like it was, a flight going out over the water.
It is. I mean, for all intents and purposes.
It's like going out of the country. But there was that, and then I went to France when I was a senior, right after I graduated high school. So I was 18 years old. I could drink legally in France, so I had my parents signed a waiver that said, if he wants to go grab a beer at lunch or whatever, or have wine with dinner. It was a beer at lunch. It was more like wine with dinner or whatever. But I went to France and we went all over. It was a month-long trip. So I went to Normandy, I went to Nice, went to Paris, went to Avignon, like hit kind of all of the different sort of like I mean,
I'd love to go to Nice.
well, so Nice was probably the most beautiful place I ever visited. But we went there, so we took the TGV train, like the super high speed train from Avignon, from Paris to Nice. But the 2 days before that, we went to Normandy and saw the beaches. And this is before Saving Private Ryan came out, where I really had like a visual reference for it, which probably would have broke me worse. But it was the weirdest.
Before that, wasn't necessarily. Saving Private Ryan came out in 98.
99. So. This is 97. Summer of 97.
Okay.
So
it's the same year, basically.
I was going to see Saving Private Ryan in like a year and a half, but I hadn't. So I go to Normandy and I see the beaches, basically, where they came aboard in World War II. And it was the most uncomfortable energy. And I'm not like, I don't think you've ever heard me say that as far as like energy, but there was just a bad feeling there. And it was beautiful, but terrifying. And then we go to Nice. Okay,
well, I was going to say, but it's interesting. So you saw Saving Private Ryan or some of these movies. I'm assuming there's like Longest Day or whatever. You also want to figure that you could also...
The one that, the movie that sticks out for me for World War II most is Saving Private Ryan. And that beach scene is 30 minutes of... 41 minutes. Yeah, terror. The most... the movie broke me. Really, we've talked about that a bunch of times on the podcast, but that movie just, it emotionally wrecked me. Like, bad. Really, really bad. And yeah, I'm looking at this, I'm like, oh my God, this is that place where I was. And I'm like, it was one of the times I got it right. I can't say got it right because they're shooting it there, but it's just like, yeah, this is why there's that bad energy and that uncomfortable energy there. And then you go to Nice. And Monaco, like Nice is right next to Monaco, so you just kind of like hop over literally this wall and you're in Monaco and you can watch the changing of the guard in Monaco, which is very Bondian to go and see that stuff. But yeah, France was gorgeous and it was beautiful people and wonderful food. It's everything and the thing I was most surprised about in France, granted, I'm with like a group of students and we're younger and whatever, but there was no rude treatment whatsoever for me or for anyone that was there with. The only people that got treated bad were people that were rude Americans, but I had no problem. I would learn how to say like how much and no thank you, and like learn like 5 phrases. I didn't speak any French going there. The rest of the kids did, which was also kind of strange. I wound up communicating a lot in Spanish in France, oddly enough, because there were more people that spoke Spanish than spoke English. So I was probably
especially on the southern side of the country.
Yeah, that was my favorite moment. There was I met up with this girl who was one of the foreign exchange students the summer before that had come to Florida, and we go to this party and like my student had taken me to, and she's there with her boyfriend. Her boyfriend's name is Gaspar, which I thought was just the greatest like French name. And he can't speak English and I can't speak French, but we both speak poor Spanish. So we literally are just stumbling through conversation in Spanish one another. It's fucking amazing.
No one sings like Gaspar. No one.
I know you were going to.
Anyways,
yes.
Anyways,
so that's that, and that's the only time, and now will be China, which is gonna. I actually have an idea that's gonna sound exactly like this when I go to China.
Could you do it slower?
最高な気持ちで
More intensity.
That's what's going to be. That's Japanese, by the way. So that's going to be a movie that we will talk about, I'm sure, in this podcast. But so you've globetrotted quite a bit.
A little bit.
What's the most visually striking place you've been to?
Iceland.
100%.
And actually, it's funny because there aren't really that many movies that are set in Iceland, but there are tons of movies that film in Iceland. For example, you remember the Tom Cruise Oblivion film? Yeah. Well, that's what Iceland looks like. They didn't have to set design that place, and that's the reason why they were up there in Iceland, is because that landscape, that's what Iceland looks like.
Have you watched this season of Black Mirror?
No, I don't watch Black Mirror. I need to.
There's an episode that's shot. Everyone watched the episode and they're like, "Where the hell are they?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's Iceland." I think that's a defining characteristic of Iceland, is if you're watching something and you're like, where in God's name is that? It's probably
It looks
Iceland.
like Mars almost.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very. And the thing
Alien.
is that the reason why I think it's most alien for me is because I grew up in Tennessee, where I'm just surrounded by trees and mountains that are more of this kind of rolling hill variety.
Yeah.
Whereas in Iceland, there are no trees. And that's one thing people don't realize. There are no trees in Iceland. There are man-made planted forests, quote unquote, that are like 30 years old with like pine trees that are maybe 15 feet tall. That's it. Everything else is just kind of pasture, and it's flat as all get out. And then there are these jutting black volcanic mountains of just stone that come out of nowhere. Everything's run by geothermal energy. There's so many geysers. There's so many waterfalls. I mean, just the place is just. It's one of those places that almost feels kind of like the Grand Canyon, where you'll be on this kind of flat plain, and then everything just falls out, and there's this just 190 meter waterfall.
So was Iceland home of just volcano? That's where how it was formed.
Yeah, it was just formed that way, and it's because it's not, there are no active volcanoes there or anything like that anymore. But it was just there was never any pollination there to allow trees or anything like that. But I mean, there's plenty of vegetation. Like in the summer, I was there in the summer, and it's green as all fuck. I mean, it's really pretty.
Just no trees.
But there's just no trees. It's just this long, 4-foot kind of wheat grass, almost looking everywhere, and then these black mountains that jut out of nowhere, and then strange, like almost gray beaches, like gray sandy beaches. So it was this very but there's nothing I can really equate it to except for like Oblivion. But I knew that they had shot Oblivion there, and just from us talking with when we were in Los Angeles, we were talking with one of the associate producers on the film, and they were like, "Oh yeah, they were shooting that in Iceland for like 6 months." And I was just like, yeah, they didn't have to do anything up there. They're like, oh, we need a landscape that doesn't look. Yeah,
you're either going to shoot there or you're going to shoot out in Nevada and
right.
at the Devil's Rock, whatever it's called.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, that's the most visually striking place I've ever been. But that I don't have any real kind of correlation to film with that.
Well, so from a filmic standpoint, when you were little, what's the first time you remember seeing someplace that wasn't home, that wasn't the U.S.?
This is actually, it's a really cheesy answer, actually, but I remember watching in a movie I still love and I still think is one of the greatest screenplays of all time. Was written by he was blacklisted.
Trumbo?
Yeah, Trumbo, Dalton Trumbo, which is Roman Holiday.
Okay.
So Roman Holiday, I think, is it's this very...
How old were you when you saw Roman Holiday?
I'm like 7.
Jesus Christ.
Roman Holiday was like a family movie that came out back in the late 50s, dude.
Of course, you're 7 and you watch. I was still shitting myself at 7. I was not watching Roman Holiday.
But, I mean, if you watch Roman Holiday now, there's nothing. There's, I mean, that's
I'm not saying it's licit. It's just a weird thing. Like, oh, what's your 7? What movie did your 7-year-old watch the other night? Oh, Roman Holiday.
Did you watch The Wizard of Oz? I mean, I'm sure that there's tons of movies that you watched back then.
The Wizard of Oz and Roman Holiday are a little different.
Maybe a little different, but not that different. Anyways, so I saw Roman Holiday at a really young age, and I do really still love that movie, but I remember that being kind of an interesting thing because at that point I had not traveled yet at all except to Colorado. Ouch. And I remember
that might sound a little strange because I muted myself as I opened that.
But I think Roman Holiday is kind of an interesting movie to bring up just because it's a movie that involves two people from different cultures, from like an American and somebody from royalty in a place where they're not really, where neither of them are home, essentially. Yeah. It's got a journalist and you've got this, and they're in this beautiful, I mean, it's actually it's a very well filmed movie. It kind of highlights a lot of the great places around that city, and it is a travel movie. It's It's this very pretty, place. And I just remember seeing a lot of that. And I feel like what a lot of people see is see movies that take place in Paris. There are lots of French movies where you're getting all of this kind of, the romanticism of Paris and
It seems like that's, other than Woody Allen, it seems like that's dropped off over the like that seemed like it was a really big thing in the like 70s and 80s and 90s, and I don't think it's as popular anymore. But maybe
maybe it became a little oversaturated. I mean, I would honestly argue that Woody Allen not only revitalized it, but may have made the best Paris movie of all time with Midnight in Paris.
Yeah, I
because
I put that on my list.
Because that's a travel movie that literally traverses time.
It's a time travel travelogue. Yes, it's
and so you're getting Paris in different periods of its history, which is quite brilliant, actually. It's very well made.
He had to go somewhere where people hadn't heard about Woody Allen. So he went to Paris and he went back in time. So
right. Yeah,
that's bad.
I mean, it's a clever movie because you can actually show off Paris in sort of a different light than you typically would. And that's that I think that's smart because it does make it kind of this travel experience, like you're going somewhere else.
Well, and it's interesting because a lot of like I have one, like probably I have a couple that were like that really inspired some of my interest in other countries and or gave me a really bad view of other countries in a way that wasn't fair to it. But there were a lot of ones that were period pieces that I was more interested in the period. Like, it's gonna sound cheesy, but Three Amigos was like probably Three Amigos and Romancing the Stone were my biggest introduction to South American countries and Latin America, basically. And and these are very stereotypical views of these places. Especially Romancing the Stone is especially harsh.
It's pretty. I won't say inaccurate, maybe, but
it's Colombian drug lords.
Yes, exactly.
And it shares an actor of the El Guapo is in both of them. But Three Amigos, what I thought was interesting is that I liked that while they're making a lot of very ethnic jokes, most of the jokes are played against the Westerners that have come into this culture and not against the people. The people are the smart ones making fun of kind of the Western misconceptions about that kind of thing.
Yeah,
I like.
that is kind of something that I feel like you see a lot of when you're working with really good travel types of movies. And speaking of one that you've already played a clip from, like one of the other things that I had the opportunity to visit Eastern Europe, and the what it shows in like Euro Trip, is that whole scene is first off fucking hysterical, where it's just like, man, what can $3.86 get us out in this city? And the next thing you know, they're just like, and they're like basically in the VIP section of some fucking club, and it's just like they're rich. Not quite like that over there, actually. But and that's one of those other things is just like I had seen all this stuff from like the Eastern Bloc, like growing up and watching these spy movies and stuff like that, and everything just looks so fucking gray and destitute and stuff like that. Man, I'm just telling you, like Eastern Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia is just gorgeous. It's so lush and so beautiful.
Well, that's what's interesting to me is that I, in preparing for this trip, I'm watching a lot of like kind of travelogue stuff because in our lifetime, a lot of these movies that I watched are old. They're old film. They're on old film stock. Some of them are. My introduction to Australia was through Crocodile Dundee, which I actually think is a pretty fucking good introduction to Australia. But it's shot in the 80s and it's low budget, so Australia just looks like every other movie looked in the 80s. Like it's not real. Versus now, I can go watch a travelogue on YouTube shot in 4K, and I go, oh wow, this place looks entirely different just from a coloring standpoint.
Do you remember? Do you remember the movie Rogue that we watched with the alligator, the giant alligator? It's got.
We watched this.
I think we watched it together. Have you ever seen Rogue?
I've watched.
It's got Radha Mitchell in it. Is one of the main characters, and
sounds vaguely familiar.
And what's his name? Sam. He was in the Terminator movie. Sam. He played
Worthington.
Yeah, Sam Worthington.
Ooh, I don't think so because I don't like him.
Well, he's Australian.
Yeah, he's the Avatar guy.
And so yeah.
No, I don't want to watch that.
That sucks, man. That's actually in the last probably That came out over a decade ago. I think
I think we caught the end of it on cable or something like that, or maybe parts of it.
No, because I own it. I own it. I love it's a actually very well reviewed movie. It's
all right.
It's this movie that's a kind of a creature feature, but same thing. It's like it's this kind of trip into the outback.
Yeah.
But it gives you such a different. So funny because you have like Crocodile Dundee, and then you watch this movie, and you're just like, "Holy shit! The Outback is terrifying."
Yeah. Well, and so Crocodile Dundee was my first, and the second was, fuck. I don't want to say the movie because I'm gonna probably give it to one of you guys the next time we do a cold reading. But there's another movie from the late '90s that's a whole other side of it, and then you have stuff like Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, which is a good travel movie that's also in Australia. Is Priscilla Australia?
Yeah.
New Zealand? Yeah, let's get the
Australia.
But yeah, it's weird how that you view that, and then you go see these places in person, or you see them. That's what I'm most curious to see, what China looks like versus everything I've seen of China has been from movies, because I've never been to China. So U.S. stuff looks the same. China's going to be different. But and you talked about European stuff. So I mean, that was my introduction to Europe, other than Bond movies, which I kind of knew a little bit with Roger Moore, was European Vacation.
Oh, sure.
And and that's a tough movie because it's not a great movie. It's the least good of the three main vacation movies, I would say. It's got some jokes that are very poorly executed as far as just it being this egocentric or ethnocentric.
By the way, the three main vacation movies are Vacation, European Vacation, and Vegas Vacation.
Fuck you, Papa Giorgio. No, but I mean, my introduction to that, and this part was my favorite.
Hey, look, kids! There's Big Ben and there's Parliament.
And what I liked about that movie for me is that I'm watching these people in Europe, and I'm watching that scene where it's Clark Griswold driving his family around a roundabout, and he can't exit the roundabout for like the entire day. So it first starts off all this excitement of like, hey, look, kids, Big Ben, Parliament, and it gets to the end, and he's just lost it. And I'm like, I've been on that trip in the U.S. I've never done it in another country, but I could see what it would be like. And that was one thing my family was never into my dad didn't have any interest in traveling overseas, it seemed. And I don't even know, it's funny, he maybe for work with mobile at some point went overseas, but I don't think he ever traveled abroad.
Interesting.
And my mom, not a ton either. My grandparents did. My grandparents went on cruises. They went to Ireland. They went to Germany. My grandma, both sides of my grandparents. My parents were not travelers.
When I was 12 years old, my mom and two of her friends who had kids who were around the same age as me, we spent Thanksgiving in Paris.
Oh,
they planned this trip for 8 days, and we went. And over the course of 8 days, I think we went to 12 different museums.
Wow.
It was packed. It was just every day was like, we're up at 7 a.m. We're going to a museum. We go eat lunch. We're going to another museum. We go back to the hotel. They're going to go out and have drinks. We're going to go do the kids are going to go do this thing or whatever. It was packed. Every single day was packed.
You do, but that's kind of how you vacation a little bit too, right?
Not particularly anymore.
Oh, really? See,
no.
I'm fascinated by that because I have this do or die attitude when I'm especially for China. I'm talking to the person I'm traveling with, Dean, about the trip, and he's like, oh, get a bunch of movies on your iPad for the, I'm like, oh, well, for the flight, I'm like, probably be sleeping a lot of the flight. And he's like, no, it's like, we're there for 12 days, and you need something to watch in your room. And I'm like, I'm gonna fucking watch a movie in my room. I'm in China. It's an expensive flight to get to China. I plan to not spend much time at all in a hotel room. Because it doesn't make any sense to me. Why would I fly 15 hours to spend 4 hours
I'm not like that.
It's interesting to me.
No, I'm not like that at all. I'm a compulsive planner, and I will definitely plan, but I do not overplan. I'm not one of those people that I'm going to waste. I'm not going to waste a ticket somewhere where I should be spending, because that's actually one of the huge things is everyone said you have to spend an entire day at the Rodin Museum. Spend the entire fucking day there. We didn't, and I was 12 years old and pissed off that we had to leave. 12 years old, pissed off that we had to leave a fucking museum. So that just tells you something. It's just like, as a kid,
little Ben,
and I wasn't alone. Like, the kids I was with were just like, this place is awesome. I mean, and like all of the stories and like all of the exhibits and the things that are interactive there was pretty awesome. So anyways, I'm one of those people that, like, I let room. I like to have time to breathe and kind of understand it, or have a chance not to have.
I understand what I understand that. I get. Yeah,
but I make a hit list, and I'm hitting that list.
Yeah. I agree with you on that. But it's interesting. It's interesting, and as far as the movie stuff goes, we don't have to stay not tethered to the subject.
Well, no, but I think it's actually, because there's another side of it too. Because when I was older and I started watching, because growing up, all you see is romanticized other cultures for the most part, except for the time when it's the butt of a joke, when it's a Colombian drug lord and romancing the stone, or when it's making fun of a certain subculture or something along those lines. So I had never watched any of these kind of underground films. You know? And I went to film school, and one of the movies I remember renting when I was a freshman at FSU, they had a VHS of Luis Buñuel's 1950 film Los Olvidados, which is about Mexican street gangs.
Okay.
And that movie is fucking bleak. Like, it's basically just
you don't say.
No, and I'm just like, it basically takes what Rodriguez did with El Mariachi and Desperado and makes this very, like, kind of artistic, fun, kind of pulpy version of this, like, kind of street violence thing, and it just basically brings it back to reality, and it's just like, oh, fucking kids are dying everywhere. Like, this is the, it sucks. By the way, it sucks in Mexico. Like, that's kind of what it gets. Like, it sucks to be poor in Mexico and have around the trade, the drug trade. This is back in 1950. So,
and I don't see, though, in Mexico, it's changing now, obviously, because there are a lot more Mexican filmmakers.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
But that's been for a long time of Mexico being the
butt of jokes.
It's either Spring Break, Cancun, or it's like a third world country that you never want to be involved in at all.
Well, to quote the Brothers Bloom, why are they having this meeting in Mexico? I mean, not to completely marginalize an entire race or culture, but Mexico is a terrible place.
But I gotta watch that movie again.
Oh, it's such a fun movie.
Speaking of which, I have to say it on the podcast because otherwise I won't remember it after. But I had an idea. This is just to tease all of you out there, and we'll get right back into our subject here. But I had an idea for a podcast. It's the opposite of rose-colored glasses. Maybe is I want each one of us to pick one or two movies that we've seen that we very much disliked for whatever reason. And when we have to rewatch them, we have to have not seen them within the last, let's say like 20 years or 10 years, whatever we want to make like a
10
long...
10 or 15 years.
10 or 15 years to revisit. Because I was thinking about that with... I've forgotten what the hell the movie was. But there was a movie that I was thinking about that I'm like, man, I have not watched that. And I dismissed it right away when I watched it the first time.
Right,
and I'm like, I wonder if it might be interesting to revisit that and say, oh, I actually have a better appreciation. Or,
sure.
No, it still sucks.
I think it's a great idea, actually. So,
but anyway, so remember that one. That'll come up in September. It's a long tease.
I will definitely remember that. But no, it's... anyways, I think that there's multiple sides to it. But then, because I'm talking about these other movies, like, so there was a place I was also fortunate enough to visit in 1998, which is Brazil. And Brazil, I had such an amazing time there. But I'm not blind to the fact that I was staying with a very well-to-do family. Two physicians.
I'm guessing it was not at all like the movie Brazil by Terry Gilliam.
Well, actually, yeah, it was pretty close. No, it was I was staying in very nice places, in nice neighborhoods. We were going to eat at nice restaurants. We were, conversing with people who went to these same nice private schools and stuff like that. And I had this experience that was very, that I even understood at the time, being 14 years old, very, almost a sedated version of the country. And as you drive down the interstate, on one side there's this like multi-billion-dollar multiplex mall, and on the other side there are shanties. I mean, just dirt shanties.
Wild dogs.
And I didn't have any.
So it's like Florida.
Right. No, it's very much, well, it's like Florida times about 100.
Yeah.
But then, so a couple of years later, the movie City of God comes out, and I watched that, and I was profoundly moved because I was just like, oh, I was right there. I was there in Sao Paulo. I was there in Campinas. And it's just like, oh, there's half of the town that you don't go to. They're like,
it was the other side of that
coin. No,
coin.
you will get murdered. Like, you can't go there. And watching that, just watching even a dramatization of that, really profoundly affected me. Because City of God's a fucking, I mean,
amazing.
Shit, that could come close to my top 20 of all time, at least from the impact it initially affected me with.
Well, one of my good friends from high school, who was actually born in Norway but grew up in Brazil, because his dad was like an international businessman, and he met my friend's mom, international businessman.
We are international businessmen.
But for real. No, his dad was Norwegian. He went to Brazil on business, met this Brazilian librarian that he fell in love with. They got married. They went back to Norway. He had my friend Helgi Pedersen, the most like Nordic name you could possibly have ever heard. And then went back to Brazil, and he grew up in Brazil. And so he saw that movie and like he's like, oh yeah, this isn't what I dealt with, but I'm familiar with all of it. He also had one of the weirdest, like, we were both 18 and he was terrified because there was a chance he was going to have to go to the Brazilian draft. He thought he was going to get drafted for the Brazilian army, even though he was a Norwegian. He had Norwegian and Brazilian dual citizenship, and then U.S. after he came to the States. But I'm like, that terrified me as an 18-year-old because I'm like, I can't imagine the draft still existing in 1997. It's fucking crazy.
But anyways,
that movie's amazing.
I just thought that was also really interesting because that's a place I had been, and I had completely. I just hadn't felt any of that culture. I just saw it. I saw it from afar. I saw it when you were driving down the street and you see these entire neighborhoods where everything's made of just aluminum sheets and stuff like that, and kids are walking around naked and stuff like that. And I was just like,
crazy.
And like I said, literally on the other side of this highway, there are malls and shit. And people walking around, in nice clothes and fucking $190 Levi's. That's about how much a pair of Levi's cost down in fucking Brazil.
It's crazy. And there was a lot of, it's funny, I didn't actually put it on anything on my list, but it's actually really interesting, especially to talk about in today's political climate. But a lot of what I think I know about Russia comes from 80s movies told at the height of the Cold War. And it's crazy to see Cold War mania coming back in this generation, because we are at the point where the generation that's growing up now is going to feel like we did in the 80s, where Russia was this enemy. Then all of a sudden it's not really the enemy, and now you just hear the weird stories about how much blue jeans cost in Russia, and it's $150, and people wait in lines for it. But there was a lot of Russian influence on almost everything. That was why, even like things like the Naked Gun had things about the Cold War and shit in it.
Right now, though, and one of the things that you can still say at least is good is positive about today's atmosphere in filmmaking is that there's lots of good movies coming out of Russia still. There's a lot of really challenging filmmaking being done,
which is amazing that they can even happen.
Well, it's not being censored.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that's kind of interesting. That's one of the things that people, especially my mom, said about visiting Cuba is that, like, Cuba, everything is super censored, everything is super whatever, except for art. And they're like, art, apparently, and it's because Fidel had this hard-on for art, basically, and was just like, you want pure art. And so...
Which is not the case necessarily in the Asian countries.
Exactly. So there's a shitload of oppression, or there was, just some cataclysmic oppression there in that country, but there's amazing art that reflects all of that oppression, which you couldn't get away with in a place like China.
Yeah, and it's fucking crazy to think
China's
about.
a place where you get thrown in jail for being a fucking dissident.
Well, I'm looking up places in Beijing to like tour around, and there's a film museum in Beijing.
That's gotta be interesting.
And I was like, "What is like?"
What's in there?
Well, and I look at some pictures and stuff from it. And I'm like, I'm not going to understand anything because it's going to be in Mandarin, and I'm not going to have any. Like it was a very, very Chinese experience, and it's all Chinese film, and I'm like, I'm kind of curious to see what that's the kind of place I'd like to go with an English translator to say, hey, like, what is the history of film, of cinema in China? I mean, we got a lot of Eastern influence has hit us more so from Japan necessarily than China, but still there's a lot of that influence in our art. What happened to it there? Like what was the fear of was it just that they were scared of being made fun of? But then you look at Russia and you're like, well, fuck, Putin doesn't like to look stupid, but he'll let film come out.
Yeah,
like it's interesting.
Yeah, he still wants to win awards.
It's true.
There are some very strange places in the world where I feel like censorship is a huge thing. I mean, China is probably one of the more interesting places right now, is because such a huge amount of money gets contributed to these huge Hollywood films from the China market.
Yeah, and
yet half of the movies that we release there have to either be edited or banned completely. And so weird. It's just weird that, you know, a new Transformers movie can make $350 million in China, but
because it doesn't talk about religion, it doesn't have sex, and it doesn't have like it checks all their boxes.
Right, exactly.
So, I mean, Michael Bay is the dream. He's the biggest Chinese filmmaker there is right now, is Michael Bay.
Right.
It's interesting.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting for sure.
And the fucking and how sad is this shit? So you're talking about what your influence. We were influenced with Bond, right, of showing us foreign countries. So nowadays it's got to be kids watching fucking Transformers movies because they're globetrotting the same way that like Indiana Jones. I mean, Indy was another big influence for me as far as travel goes. I mean, obviously, first of all, the filmic device of showing the map and the journey that they're taking,
love it so much.
So simple, but as a kid,
it's great because you really
huge. You're like, oh my god, I know where what's happening.
You
get
a sense of the world. You get a sense of oh shit, this is a really long journey. Like
when James Bond goes to Tokyo, I don't know how fucking long that was as a kid. I'm like, all right, like it doesn't make any sense. Oh, he went next door to England to Tokyo.
All it does is go to black, and then it comes up and it says Tokyo.
Yeah,
and
they're like, oh, okay, it's fucking there. But James Bond, but Indy's got to get on a plane, he's got to get in a boat, he's got to go to all these fucking vehicles to travel across these great distances, which is fantastic.
Speaking of the Naked Gun, there's the one where it's just like bouncing all over the map, where it's just like
it starts playing Pac-Man.
So fucking good. But no, it's definitely kind of interesting to think about the way that our perception of the world has shifted through popular media, and the way that we get that, you know, because like you said, I mean, things about like Russia, it's just like it was the enemy for so long, then it becomes something kind of benign, and now is that going to be a new, you know, bad guy in cinema again? Or
and as you get older, it's interesting. So like Lost in Translation was a really big movie as far as kind of that travelogue goes. And I remember watching Lost in Translation, and what I like about that film from a personal standpoint is I never really viewed Lost in Translation as this like foreign. It was a character, but it was like for me, even though it is major, it was a minor character because to me it was a very personal story that I went through. So I traveled a lot through the U.S. as a kid on family road trips. So I remember going to the pool at a motel that we'd be staying at for one night, and there'd be other kids at the pool, and we'd become friends. Right. It was one night, just like one fucking night in the middle of between Arizona and Wisconsin. And we become friends, and there's no Facebook, there's no fucking internet, there's no text messages, I don't have a phone, I'm not going to ever see this person again. You have one shared moment you know, over the bathing suit hand job. Maybe get a view. Titties. Yeah, maybe like see a little. You know, we don't know what's going on. By the way, that did not how you just keep smiling at me like
I'm just laughing because in my head I just keep thinking like so. There's like what are you drinking for a relaxing time?
Well, that was the slower and with more intensity was my lost in translation.
I know.
I love the idea of these two people that meet. That there's no other circumstance in which they meet. Ben just raised his hand.
Yes,
it's about to happen.
Can the speaker address the class? Well, no, I think one of the best, and of course, I probably brought multiple times, but it's the Before series.
Yeah, I literally put in my notes, Ben will bring up Before series.
Yes. So the ironic part is that the middle chapter of the Before series, which is Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and Before Midnight, is that the middle chapter all takes place within Paris. And but the thing is she lives in Paris. And so the middle movie doesn't feel like any sort of travel movie to me. It doesn't feel like even a travel log. Like they're going to these kind of, iconic places in the middle of the city.
It also doesn't show up on the like travel list of like the other two show up, but that one does not actually show up on there. It's interesting.
Well, it's still a very pretty movie, and it still shows off Paris in a way, but it's not. Paris doesn't even hardly play a character in it, except for the fact that they ride for a boat on the Seine, which they say that they want to do.
It could take place anywhere, and it wouldn't change it.
It could take place anywhere, and it wouldn't change the movie. Whereas the first, they meet on a fucking train, and then they are in, right on the border of France and Greece. No, France and I forgot where they were, but anyways, so. Yeah, I mean, they're on a train. It's all about being in motion, in transition, two characters who are going certain places, going different directions in their lives, coming together for this one night, basically, and having the location be the romantic part of it. Be the fact that neither of them are from here, neither of them plan on coming back here. It's all about the moment. And in the last film, Before Midnight, is they're on vacation with their young twin girls, and the twin girls get put away. But it's them being in a location that's foreign to them.
Yeah.
And so I feel like Linklater had something to say with the fact that he was basically trying to place these different narratives, which all happen in kind of relative real time, in situations where they feel very transitive, where they feel like these characters are traveling through these moments, and it's a matter of, are they going to connect? Are they going to pass each other in the night? That type of thing. And ultimately, I think and that's actually up to the viewer in all cases for all movies, because they don't end up together at the end of the first movie. The second movie, they don't show them together. And you can only suppose that in the third movie, yes, they did show up together, but are they now still traveling in opposite directions? So I think that it's a really interesting analogy for the way that we perceive us traveling through the world physically, like in different places, basically, versus the way that we emotionally travel from one place to another. Because I consider those characters travelers. Yeah, they're traveling through life, and they've just happened to intersect and kind of run alongside one another for a while. I think that those are my ultimate kind of travel movies.
Well, and it's interesting, and the only other one I really wanted to get into on my list, and we'll do it briefly, is it's almost the flip side coin of the situation you're talking to. So you're talking about, so you've got these movies that are about these transitive people moving through locations. They're in places they don't know, but it's this constant motion. And then you have a movie like In Bruges, which
that was actually one I wanted to bring up, because Bruges they make fun of constantly, which is apparently beautiful.
And what I love it's because for them Bruges is purgatory. It is this waiting room, right? Yeah. We don't know which way we're going to go outside of this. Right. So we've been thrust together into this place, and I love is that they're constantly making fun of Bruges, but they're also finding the most like absurdly strange things to see. Like, it's moments of beauty and
climbing
then moments
up the tower.
Yeah, and then you've got moments of like the movie that Dinklage is shooting that looks like it's fucking crazy, and like you've got all these different sides, and it's each of the characters seeing the parts of themselves in Bruges instead of like, you know, like all of Brendan Gleeson's stuff are these serene, calm things. All of the things that Colin Farrell's finding are fucking batshit crazy, just nuts stuff.
100%. I was actually thinking about bringing it up just because of that.
I legitimately, that was the director just did finally got some wins for Three Billboards.
Yep.
In Bruges is a better movie. By a pretty decent margin, and it's just such a enjoyably well put together little poem, you know, and I highly recommend
and
that.
That's not to disparage the performances of Sam Rockwell and Woody Harrelson, and especially Frances McDormand, who are all master classes in what they do in that movie. In Bruges is just a more inventive movie, and it's more fun, and
I fucking love that Martin McDonagh is directing and writing movies completely out. He's an Irish filmmaker. He's like, I'm gonna do this movie in Bruges, and then I'm gonna go to fucking Mississippi or Missouri for Three Billboards, and like he's just all over the place. I love that shit. But yeah, In Bruges is one of those that definitely made me look at that movie is inherently fascinating to me just from the fact that I don't know this place at all. And it's harder for that to happen for me in movies. Now I've seen Iceland, I've seen China, I've seen Japan, I've seen stuff. Belgium is a pretty untapped resource for a lot of that stuff. But I think that is our time for this evening. We missed Nick once again, and I wanted to talk about oh shit, I took it off. I'll play this instead for him.
We have to go back, Kate. We have to go back.
That by the way, is how I felt at the end of every trip almost every trip I've ever taken other than Texas. Sorry. Anyway, thank you so much for listening to the New Way podcast. We will be off probably for a few weeks here, and then regroup. I imagine my guess, if I had to peg it right now, other than the podcast we've been preparing for, is I think we're probably going to do a big Ready Player One Member Berries nostalgia kick podcast.
I think that sounds like a good one.
It'll probably kick off our April set of podcasts. So thanks for listening. You guys know where to find us. And you know what? If you got a friend and they like to listen to three assholes sitting around talking about shit, talking about movies no one's ever seen, show us our podcast. I talked to one of Ben's grinder dates at the Beer Fest a few weeks ago, and he was enjoying the podcast, and he didn't seem like it was the worst time he's ever had listening to it, even though he's trying to listen to all of them in order, which is just a bad idea.
I told him that. I said start at 32 and go from there, but
Greg, we know you've got friends. Like, just get us out. Everyone tell one person you know about the New Way, and they'll tell one person, and they'll tell another, and another, and so on, and so on, and so on, and so on. So that is our Wayne's World reference for the night. We will talk to you in a few weeks. Konnichiwa.
That's the
motherfuckers.
That's the wrong language. Let's work on this again.
First of all, au revoir? No?
Au revoir, les enfants.
Au revoir, les enfants. All right, we'll talk to you next time.
Cheers.
Peace.